1.5. Still going for it. Let me refresh the page. Perfect. Well, welcome to Daydreams, the live interactive podcast where our guests can interact with our audience, and our audience can ask questions and give out fun emotes in the Twitch chat. Welcome, Mr. Dan. How are you doing today?
Not too bad, Dylan. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Little tired, long day, but can't complain.
That's what happens when you deal with us on the West Coast, right?
So where you at?
I'm in LA.
LA, okay. I actually just talked to somebody else that was over in LA, and so it's like 5 o'clock for you guys right now, right?
Yep.
It's always the time change difference that always gets me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to make sure I put it in. Thankfully, Google Calendar automatically adjusts the schedule. So if you send it out to somebody, my time, it says 8 p.m. Their time, it automatically adjusts it, which is great. But I've run into a couple times where I've sent it out and people are like, "Oh, I thought you meant like 8 p.m. my time." I was like, "No, it says it in the calendar, bro. Like I can adjust it for you." So.
I did that the other day with a podcast from India.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, so what time did you have to get on the podcast then?
They put 10 on there, and I said, "Oh, so that would be 10 a.m. your time, 10 p.m. my time." They said, "No, we adjusted it for you." So, they were at 10 p.m. Now it's at 10 a.m.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
I just talked to somebody else. I had to adjust my schedule again because Saturdays are the only days I can do morning podcasts, and that side of the world is, it's always that 12-hour shift. So I can't do like an 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. podcast at night throughout the week when it's like 6 a.m. for them over there.
Okay.
But tell me about yourself, man.
Let's see. I grew up poor in this small town in Texas, moved to Colorado, went to high school, living with my grandmother, then moved to California where I was born. And I tell everybody it took me 20 years to get home. And I worked for the phone company in both Colorado and California for a total of 37 years. And I became an activist because I saw that we were not being treated with dignity and respect. I wanted some kind of hold in my own destiny. So I chose to get involved in a leadership position. I eventually ran for office, which was a big mistake twice. And I wanted to get what I had to say to folks out there. So I wrote the book.
So you're an activist, but activist for what?
Mostly for the labor movement, but I've gotten involved with the Democratic Party, and I'm a progressive. And so we get involved in other issues that Bernie talks about, things like $15 minimum wage. I mean, $15 an hour minimum wage, and things like that.
Now, the minimum wage situation is really interesting because, we're seeing companies starting to compete more for workforce. And they're doing that by offering more pay incentives, but it doesn't seem like it's really attracting anybody to come work at these places. Do you think that there's a cultural movement that's shifting away from the normal, I guess, work schedule?
Yeah, I do believe so. In fact, one of the things that labor is pushing for now is, I guess, a 35-hour work week, which would be very nice. And it was talked about in the beginning when we first started this conversation back in the 1900s. So I'm glad it's come back around. And I think people are starting to realize that wages are some arbitrary numbers that somebody decided they would pay their employees. And it's not really based on what you do or what your responsibilities are or any of that. It's just sort of out there.
Right. We have David joining the chat. What's up, David? How you doing? Hope you're having a great evening. My issue with, I think the minimum wage should be raised. I think to say that here in Georgia it was $7.25. I don't know if it's gone up recently, but that's a pretty low number to say that my time, the thing that I cannot get back, like time only moves forward in one direction. I could be doing something. I could be doing a hobby. I could be spending time with my family, stuff that is priceless, and you can't place a value on that. But to say that my time is worth $7.25 an hour, I think is ridiculous. I think it's insulting.
It definitely is. And the higher up you get, the more your pay is disconnected for what you do. CEOs, I think they get paid for being on the golf course.
Right. Well, I understand the grunt work CEOs put in, or investors or owners put in to build a company from the ground up. And I believe there does come a point to where the owner can sit back and financially look at a company and say, I built that, you guys run it, I'm good just sitting here now that I've built it up. So I do understand the value in that, and that's not where I have a problem. Where I have a problem is, again, valuing my time at $7.25, regardless of skill level. It feels like a slap in the face. Like, I'm gonna pay you $7.25 to spend an hour here. And when you think about it that way, like, you look at your paycheck and you're like, all right, 2 weeks, it adds up, cool. But to look at my paycheck and say I just spent I spent an hour here just to earn $7.25 is completely ridiculous to me.
That's only part of the picture, though. CEOs, CEO pay, I don't mind them making a lot more than me, but it shouldn't be 500 times their average worker. That's something's gone out of whack over the years, and we need to bring that back down to a manageable level. Otherwise, the gap that you see in income inequality, is just going to get wider and wider.
Right. And I think some of the issues that we're seeing with equality income more or less have to do with the price of living, or the cost of living. Because as we've seen with the housing market right now, it's gone through the roof. Like, rent is going up. It's becoming unmanageable, unaffordable for the lower working class. And it's like, you can't do anything with $7.25 if you're working a 40-hour week. If you're working a 40-hour week, you literally, in most cities, the average cost of rent is, I think, at like $1,100 to $1,200 for a one bedroom.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's all about finding our true worth, and that's going to be a struggle, a tug of war over the next decade. I think.
How do we do that?
Well, one thing is you start bringing down the CEO pay to be more in line with everything else, and that'll take part of the income inequality picture out of.
Where do they put that money? Do they put that back in their business?
Yeah, that's where it should go. Hiring more people, because I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of times you go into businesses now and it's like a ghost town. They have maybe one or two employees, and that's simply greed on the part of these CEOs and their corporations, because they want, if they keep more, then they don't have to pay it to workers like you and me.
Well, that's the thing, and I think that the culture we're kind of identifying right now is we're sort of waking up to that reality. And
Exactly.
so I don't have a problem with a CEO making 500 times more than I do. That's not, I know I should. My issue is what happens is, and I think it's happening now, is people start to wake up and they no longer want to work at those conditions or work in those businesses where the conditions are so unequal across the up and down scale, not side to side like my peers and coworkers, but up and down through the chain of command. Like, there's just a huge pay gap. So I think that we're waking up to that reality, and sooner or later, I think that we're going to force, not by regulation, but by cultural standards and values and where we want to work. I think we're going to naturally just gravitate away from those things. Do you think that there's...
But that's only good until the next election cycle, because the pendulum swings back the other way. One of the things that happened back in 1971 was this guy, Lewis Powell. He was famous up to that point for going before the Supreme Court and arguing that cigarettes were not addicting. Excuse me. And a friend of his in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said, all these Vietnam vets are coming back, and they're complaining that we're only in the Vietnam War because it's making money for corporations. And I don't like the fact that they're bad mouthing capitalism and all this other stuff. And what can we do to get back the conversation? So he wrote this 19-page memo. It's commonly referred to as the Powell Manifesto, where he said you need to take back the conversation on college campuses. You need to create think tanks. You need to do all this stuff so that you can take over the conversation. And Nixon was so impressed, he appointed him to the Supreme Court. Ronald Reagan was so impressed, he gave copies to everyone on his cabinet. And every Republican president since Nixon has followed this blueprint. And it's gotten to the point now where I had a handyman in my house the other day, and he was saying, unions are the reason why we're in this fix. And I couldn't believe he was saying that, because it's obvious that the greed of corporations has been what has really put us in this mess. And for him to blame the wrong person sounded like he was a spokesperson for the banks or whatever. And so what I'm suggesting is that we create the Mccrory Manifesto. And I gutted the whole Powell Manifesto. I took out the word capitalism, put in democratic socialism, and I put in unions and progressives and things like that. And I made it my own, and I want it to be adopted by everybody, because Powell's plan works so well. I mean, 40 years later, you got this guy going to bat for the corporations rather than himself or for working folks. And so his plan would work for us if we can get into the schools and start talking about the issues that belong to us. I really think we can turn this around and put middle Americans back in the driver's seat.
Right. There's definitely just blatant corruption out there. It really is. Especially when you look at funding sources and where I want to say the bad lobbyists, because not all lobbyists are bad. Some lobbyists advocate for healthcare and stuff like that. But you get the picture. What'd you say?
If we can get the dark money out of politics, the stuff that's not readily traceable, that's what's causing the problem.
It is. It's money in politics. That's what causes, you said it perfectly. Money in politics causes the problem. Now the question is, how do we get it out?
Well, what you do is you first lengthen the amount of years in office. In other words, some people have a 2-year term. We need to expand that to 4 or 6 years, because at a 2-year term, the day after they're elected, they need to start raising money all over again. And if you give them some time to actually do the job before they have to start dialing for dollars, then we're going to get more out of them in terms of progressive legislation. Yeah, I really do think so.
So do you think that there should be a long-term term limit placed on these people?
Counterintuitive, but I really think that would take the pressure off our elected officials to start raising money as soon as they're elected.
So you think expanding their term, per se, instead of 2 years to 4 years, so they don't have to focus on raising money?
Exactly.
What about people that have been in the office for like 30 plus years?
I think they'll appreciate that the pressure has been taken off, but I don't believe in term limits. I think elections are term limits. I think we're allowing, if you look at chapter 7 of my book, it says that we're abdicating our oversight of politicians and political parties. And I think what we need to do as citizens of this great country is to start paying attention and realizing who does what and who's voting against us and our interests and things like that. And I think if people took it on as a real responsibility of being an American, we would soon see some of those people go by the wayside.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just don't think that there should be any reason whatsoever that somebody that is so out of touch with the social discord of the country. We have, what is it now? We're on Generation Alpha that's coming up. Like we have Gen Z who is like approaching the work age, and then Generation Alpha that's coming up. But we have people that are no offense to any of the older generation, but we have people that can't even keep up with trends. Like, don't even know what TikTok is. But
Hmm.
it's people are making social policies based off of previous conceptions of what the world was maybe 30 years ago when they entered the political sphere. But it's 2021 now. It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me why we still have some of these people in office.
Yeah, I actually got involved in an election in my congressional district about 4 years ago, where we had this guy who was a real backslapper and shaking hands with everybody, and he was constantly seen. And his predecessor, that all of a sudden had lost his district and was going to be running against him, who was a former labor attorney. However, he voted for NAFTA. He pushed it really hard, and he didn't get out of the office very much at all. He just did his work as a congressman, and that's about it. And so when it came time to support somebody, I supported the backslapper because he was, in all the right places, doing all the right things, whereas the other guy was off in his ivory tower, and people couldn't understand why I didn't go for the more labor-oriented guy, and it was for that reason because he wasn't in touch with the people.
Wasn't that what, I guess, the seats in Congress and the House were designed to be? They were supposed to be a calling. You were supposed to fill your calling. You shouldn't seek out to be in politics. And I think, no, that's not to say there are not some good people that obviously seek out politics to want to make a change from the inside. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it should be a calling that people go to, fill their duty, they do their term, and they either get reelected once or twice, and then they leave, and that's it. They fill their duty and not sit there for 30 plus years.
That's good for the ones that are, shouldn't have been elected in the first place and need to get rid of them. But there are some really good people that have been there for a long time, and they're doing a great job. And I would like to see them stay there.
Who are the good people?
I knew you were going to ask me that. Um, Adam Schiff is one of them. You may be aware of the things that he did during the issue that came up with Trump. He was one of the voices of reason that we were listening to out there. And there are other people like him. Nancy Pelosi, she's a mixed bag of tricks, as Chuck Schumer also is.
Yeah.
But I think they believe that what they're doing is right. But you're right. Maybe it's time to say we're going to replace you, and that's what progressives are actually doing. They're rubbing people the wrong way because they're saying just because this guy was elected once doesn't mean we have to support him again. We need to look at our other options, and they're upsetting the Democratic Party by doing that. And I'm sure that's happening on the other side too with the Republicans.
I was watching this really interesting video, and maybe I can link it in the comment section later, but um it was this chart that was, I think it was Stanford or Harvard did a study about what laws were passed and the popularity of that law or an idea in the face of the public. And basically what they found was you have a
Uh,
graph or a line. You know what I'm talking about? And
yeah,
it turns out no matter how popular the idea is or unpopular the idea is, no matter which side of the spectrum it is, it can have 100% support, it can have 0% support. There's always, 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 no matter what the popularity is, a 30% chance of it to be enacted and or passed in Congress as a law. However,
exactly.
the line is completely different for businesses and corporations.
Yep.
Depending,
I,
no matter which political side of the spectrum you're on.
yeah. Go back and look at the Powell memo though, and it'll all become crystal clear to you
Mm-hmm. Why
because
would
they've followed that to a T, and it's created all sorts of problems for working people.
see? I am And that's more of a Republican idea, right?
Oh yeah, that definitely was. That came from the Chamber of Commerce.
See, I'm pretty sure that chart is outlined by, it doesn't matter which party presents the idea. You have a 30% chance, no matter what, if no matter where the popularity lies. And it doesn't matter which party is presented the idea in terms of corporation. I mean, that line goes significantly up depending on how popular it is in terms of corporate regulation.
Yeah, that's because there's an organization out there called ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. It's composed of big business folks, and they actually write a law or a template, hand it off to somebody, let's say in California, who's supportive of their agenda, and that guy will run with it and get his friends to sign on. And before you know it, it's a state law. And they do that in enough states, it becomes a federal law. So all the legislator has to do is put their name in as the author, and it gets passed.
So what is this organization?
I'm sorry?
What is this? What is this organization?
It's called ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council.
It's just a bunch of corporations that band together, or
Exactly. That's why we have private prisons, and they're doing so well.
no? You wrote a book on private prisons, didn't you?
Well, it's a chapter in this book, Capitalism Killed the Middle Class.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, as I was mentioning earlier at the top of the program, was I wanted to take the things that I had learned on in my time, because I saw a lot of historical things happening, like the breakup of the phone company and all that, and I wanted to pass that on to the next generation as my legacy, to say, here's what we did right, here's what we did wrong. Take your lessons from this. And I realized that it may be a memoir, but what makes it relevant to the next generation? So I did some research on things that continue to be a problem, like the criminal injustice system. But I also put in things like the gig economy, universal basic income, the advance of technology and AI, and all these things that they need to keep an eye on to make sure that workers aren't trampled in the rush to make these things real. So I threw in everything but the kitchen sink.
So you said you wanted to pass down wisdom, or what we did right with the phone companies. Now, can you elaborate on that? What was that?
The phone company, but starting with Reagan's attack on the air traffic controllers in the 80s, we've watched things taking a bite out of the middle class. I mean, right after World War II was our height of where we had more union density, more people were union, and we had the one spouse was able to stay home while the other one worked and take care of the kids, and pretty soon we saw that go away, and now people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to survive. So what I was trying to do was draw a dotted line between what happened in the past to what's going to happen in the future. And hopefully people got it. My main premise of the book is that the labor movement can save the middle class, but not today's labor movement. We are beginning to change now. I'm glad to see that we're going into areas where we weren't before, and hoping for some more wins in the South, because the South has been very successful in keeping unions out and keeping people eating hand to mouth. That's pretty much it.
What do you mean by labor movement?
The labor, unions. I was a union president of the communication workers. We represented people that work for AT&T, and when I became a president, I walked into the largest downsizing the telecommunications industry had ever seen, and in just the space of a month, we lost 1/3 of our membership, and all of a sudden we had to do some belt tightening and things like that.
At
And now
AT&T, you guys lost 1/3 of your customer membership, or
our members, AT&T was no longer really AT&T. They were SBC, which came out of Texas, In Texas, we all know about Texas, don't we?
Mhm.
It's my way or the highway. So what they did was they moved a lot of jobs into Texas that had been in places like California before. And in a right to work state, you don't really, you're an at will employee. You're not really, you don't hardly have any more rights left. And so that's what we saw happening. And uh, when I was president, I wanted to fight it tooth and nail. But some of the people on my leadership said, no, if we piss off the company enough, they'll move those jobs to, they'll move everybody's jobs to Texas. So they wanted me to go lightly, but I've always believed that it's better to fight than to die the death of 1,000 cuts.
So, in the current model with capitalism, do you think that there's any redemption arc for capitalism, or is it all just downhill?
I think if you look at the system and you'll realize that every 10 to 15 years, we're bailing out some part of capitalism, whether it was the bank, the housing bubble, or the high tech bubble, or the savings and loan crisis, the 70s and 80s. Every 10 to 15 years, we're bailing those guys out, and we're doing it with the money that is put in the coffers of state and federal by predominantly the middle class, because the poor don't pay taxes and the rich certainly find their way out of taxes. There's so many corporations that paid zero taxes last year.
So is that an issue with capitalism altogether, or is I mean, it doesn't seem like that issue would go away under like a social democratic system. It just seems like people would get better at hiding their money so they don't have to pay taxes.
You're right to a certain extent, but I think with robust oversight that some of those problems may work themselves out. I Part of my manifesto, the Mccrory Manifesto, would say that we would do like FDR did and go out and say, this company is really good to their employees. Let's give them a gold star every retail location they have. So people would start frequenting those companies that were treating their employees right. And Walmart certainly wouldn't be on that list.
Wouldn't that couldn't that innately lead to corruption though? Because if I'm the one designating gold stars, then I can pick and choose which companies that I want people to go to and give gold stars to, even if the conditions are not met. Isn't that just a like? Isn't that just extra steps?
Yeah, I suppose anything that you would do could be termed that, but I think there would be a lot of us that would be making those people stay honest, because yeah, it would be a public thing that this company is doing good by their employees. And those employees, who are not being treated right, are certainly going to be the first ones to say, "This company doesn't deserve a gold star. What are you doing that for?" And then all hell would break loose. So I think it's more manageable than you realize. Another thing I want to do is what Bernie says is put a lot of employees on their boards of directors. We talked in the past about maybe having one union person on the board, but that would be a token, and nothing would change. Nothing would get accomplished to change the company to be more friendly or more yeah, friendly is a good word for it, to their employees.
I just have the biggest. There's it's just something that just doesn't add up for me with regulating companies. And I'm not saying that it's not a good idea. It just doesn't add up for me. And I agree with you. I think that the culture of these companies need to be more aligned with the workers themselves, because I think if you take care of your own will take care of you. And I believe that 100%. Now, I, I I just don't know if forcing economics or switching up an economic system from either capitalism or to social democratic. I just I don't I'm There's a disconnect. I don't understand how that directly impacts the culture of an organization.
Okay, well, you could do it as I stated on TikTok the other night. Was See, I'm up. Um,
You're one of the good ones.
what I said was, call it whatever you want to. Every time we try to tell Finland or Sweden that they have a social democracy, they didn't. It's just that they call it something else. If you want to take away the social democracy label, just call it caring capitalism or something like that. Labels mean nothing. It's
Right.
just it's what we're doing to make things better. I think, for instance, that we're missing the boat on college tuition because uh, that is actually a what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's an investment in our future, future of our children, future of our country. I think all that ties in well together, but everybody's keeping this capitalist model where you give them these loans that they can't possibly pay off in their lifetime.
Right. Yeah.
And
I think the
that's
whole
cheating.
student loan system is there are several systems where I do believe that as a consumer of a product, whether that be healthcare being consumed, whether that's education being consumed, or social services like firefighters and police
Yeah.
officers, I think that there's a realm. Again, I think capitalism is good. Let me state this. I think capitalism is good in the luxuries of life. And what do I mean by that? I think that capitalism can be a good model for companies like Apple, or we don't have to get into, I mean, we can't get into Amazon, things like that bring the luxuries of life out, that help make systems better. But I think that specifically with healthcare,
somebody gets run over in the process, especially in Amazon. Amazon treats their people like crap.
Right, and that's more of a
Meanwhile,
cultural thing, right?
Yes, right.
And I think that, again, capitalism is okay. I think people will naturally just, like, you hear all the horror stories of working at Amazon where people can't go to the bathroom for hours. Yeah. On TikTok, and eventually that shit's gonna blow up, and nobody's gonna want to work at Amazon. Like, it doesn't sit well. Why would you want to waste your time in an unfavorable condition where you can't even go to the bathroom? Like, it doesn't. I think capitalism as a system for luxuries in life, I think people will naturally gravitate and find other ways, other products, work other places, etc. But I do think that there is a lot of benefit to having a socially democratized healthcare system, education system, police force, firefighter force, just because these things are not directly competing for that's about quality of care, right? It's about quality. It's not about quantity. We're not trying to, how many people can I get in the door? Like, how many people can I get sick to come into my hospital? It's not about that. Like, that's the wrong model. Even though healthcare operations or healthcare organizations operate in that manner, that model is not sustainable. It's not. Currently, it's not. It is not a good way to operate as a consumer who is bound to get sick, who is bound to get injured, who is bound to have some sort of illness later on in life. That is not a good model for myself or anybody, any potential consumer, but that is a must-need necessity. So I truly believe those must-need necessities should be socially democratized.
Okay, let's take the media itself. All the media in this country is owned by 6 corporations.
Yeah.
So how much are we not hearing? I had to talk to a friend in Morocco before I found out that we were closing a base in Spain and opening 2 in Morocco. And you couldn't find it anywhere except in a military magazine that spoke about it. So we're not hearing a lot of things that we should be hearing, and that's part of the fact that it's because it's a commercial entity, it's corporations, and corporations aren't going to make themselves look bad. So I think that what we have to do in that case, I don't like the fact that they follow drive-by shootings and all this kind of stuff. How do you feel about the news being pulled out from under the corporate identity and allowed to just report the news?
Oh,
Do you think
I
possibility?
think that would be. Yeah. Again, you'd have to take the money out of it.
Exactly.
There's no incentive, or it's incentive. There's no incentive for these corporations, or I mean, that's basically what these media companies are. They're corporations.
Yes.
Fox, CNN, corporations. I mean, it's ridiculous. If you turn on the news right now, they will the same story, they will report two opposite sides because they know the audience that they're catering to. And it doesn't matter which political party you're aligned. They will lie to you and they will dismiss everything if it does not align with their narrative. And it's ridiculous. And this is why platforms like podcasts, where it's just independent creators that are not funded by anything, have blown up so much. This is why people might not like Joe Rogan because he's
part of the same echo chamber, though, to tell you the truth.
Say that again?
I think most podcasts are just part of the same echo chamber.
I think once it gets to a certain point, it could be.
Well, I've been asked to be on two podcasts that were run by conservatives. One guy had me on, I answered all his questions, and then it never appeared on his website. This other guy, at the last minute, I was sitting there waiting for him to show up on Zoom, and he never came on. He just bailed on me, and then he attacked my website by saying, with foul language and all sorts of things because he was too much of a coward to talk to me face to face.
Well, we're not going to do that here. The episode is aired live, so I'm hello everybody. So I think there are some credible people out there, and I've been talking about this podcast for a while, the Dark Horse podcast, with Brett Weinstein and his significant other, Heather. I forget her last name. I don't think she goes by Weinstein, but there are people out there that are pushing the boundaries of what it means to report. We've identified the old ways of doing things, and that's where people have biases. I mean, we're all naturally predisposed to biases. But yes, as a journalist, and I'm not a journalist or anything like that, I'm just a conversationalist. I'm just here to ask questions. I think you should know the type of media you're getting into. Like if you're going to Fox or CNN, know you're getting biased news. Know you're getting news that is directly organized to perpetrate one sort of narrative. Same with, individual podcasters. If they have a conservative podcast, then that's probably the narrative that they're going to approach. That's probably what they're going to say. Same with a Democratic podcast. Now, sure, I'm not saying all this to toot our horn or anything like that, but I've literally had conservative guests. I've had socialist guests, like hardcore socialist guests that we need to do exactly everything socialist. I'm like, okay, let's figure out how that could work. Let's talk this through. I'm not the only guest we don't have, like, pretty ignorant. So that goes to both sides. So like if I literally have somebody sitting here yelling about certain group of people because they're the bad guy or they're the bad entity, then I'm just like, all right, well, we probably just won't do much with this episode afterwards.
Gotcha. Well, I'm glad you're open to all sorts of guests. I didn't mean to lump you in with all these others.
Oh no, I didn't feel lumped in. I was just venting about how other people, I guess, assume they're getting true news when they watch these news sources.
Exactly.
And they assume that what they're getting is a complete unbiased approach. But it's just know what you're getting into. Know what
that's
you're
right.
getting into.
And that's why I knew I wasn't going to be selling any books to those folks, but I wanted to be able to present our side. And it was disappointing to say the least.
How do you approach those people?
I try to, like Bernie has, try to reach common ground. That's where you start. And the one that actually interviewed me, he was saying yes more than he was saying no. And I think that may have been why he pulled it, because he realized his point was being left behind. Hang on a second. Sorry.
No worries. My dogs will occasionally bark in the background too. I think the audience misses Stark and Dobby, so they get a little vicarious love from your puppy.
Yeah.
But
attacking my-
you know, I think we've entered a culture where it's more of a debate rather than a conversation.
Yes, I agree.
And it's like, when did we get to that point? Like, why are we here? Obviously, you can probably track it through the polarization when Trump entered office. Like, that definitely just everybody went their own separate ways. They backed up into their corner, and that was it. But it's like, how do we get back?
And my book,
huh?
I actually track that in my book, because I have some conversations there I had on Facebook when things were fairly cordial, and then over time they got worse and worse.
It's just wild to me. And I luckily, knock on wood, you know, so far every political conversation I've had has been a very pleasant one.
Very good.
I personally do not have a lot of negative interactions with people that are super politically charged. However, I do see these kinds of things on social media. It's like, when you feel like you have free reign to say whatever you want behind your screen.
Yes.
And you just know that your friends on Facebook are going to click like no matter what you say. You might get one or two bad comments, but you know you're going to have those couple friends that come to your support, and you're going to get those likes, and you're going to get that little splash of positive reinforcement from dopamine because pleasure has been introduced. It's like, it's just a whole new realm.
Well, that's why I like TikTok, because both left and right have access to whatever you're saying. Somebody the other night called me a communist, so I explained to them the difference in a communist.
What would you consider yourself a communist?
Not at all, because I don't want to seize the means of production, because frankly, I wouldn't know how to run the phone company.
Good point. I think all these systems they all have their good and bad. Capitalism. Do I dare say communism? All these labels, we just have negative context to them, or positive context, depending on which party you associate with. It doesn't matter. The problem has always been and will always be, where does the money lie?
You nailed it, brother.
Where does the money lie? Now, in communism, that typically goes to a select few, and no matter what, actually, in capitalism, it goes to a select few. It's like, it doesn't matter. We're fighting over labels. We're fighting over whether capitalism is good or social democratic is good or bad. Dude, it's the money. Let's figure out where the money's going. That's what's bad.
Yeah, well, also, there are some things about capitalism I consider immoral. It really bothers me, and it has always bothered me, that whenever they have massive layoffs at a corporation, their stock shoots through the roof. Doesn't that seem immoral to you?
Is that a symptom of capitalism, though? Like, how would that be different in the form of social democracy?
Well, for one thing, you wouldn't have. It would be a public company, because that's one of the things that we've done. We've given up our rights to so many things. Look at our water. I mentioned this on TikTok the other night too. I said the corporations have taken over everything, including our water, because it's now in bottles with some company's name on it, and that was our water before. I remember when people started selling water, we said, that's never going to work. But here it is, decades later, we're still buying the little plastic bottles.
So, but going back to the employee example with people laying off and stock shooting up, how would that be any different from in a social democracy?
I would think that there would be some oversight. For instance, what's going to happen to all the people once we get rid of uh, our our tendency to use unsustainable things like coal and oil, because the resources are going to run out eventually, and we are going to have to transition to something else.
Mm-hmm.
We passed a law in California that said by 2030 we wanted to be at least 50%, maybe it was lower than that, I think 30% sustainable, and we're at 70%, so it is doable. And that's one of the things where, again, corporations and capitalism wants to keep things status quo, and that was one of the problems with AT&T. It was in one way it was good that they broke us up, because we were able to become more innovative, nimble, and be competitive. Before, we didn't have to worry about competition because there was none. We were an oligarch, and but we were safe. The stock at that time was called the Widow and Orphans Fund, because it would rise slowly, but it would never fall, because you weren't doing anything risky.
So isn't the issue with, and I think I get your point. What you're saying is there needs to be a little bit more regulation than capitalism imposes to make sure employee layoffs and things like monopolies don't occur, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. And FDR started us down that road, but 2 years after he died, they passed the Taft-Hartley Act, which brought us right to work. And it was all the dignity and respect that we had earned was gone. Sorry if it's dark.
No worries. So I know monopolies have been broken up in the past, and I don't think that they're really allowed under the veils of capitalism. Now, the issue is, and let's take Amazon for example. The issue is there's not a lack of competitors out there. There are tons of competitors that are offering better products than Amazon offers. Now, the issue is Amazon is so big and it's so native that we all as customers haven't collectively agreed to just leave. They run the marketplace because of us.
Well, you've heard about the Walmart effect, haven't you?
No, what is that?
Walmart would go into a small town and set up shop, and pretty soon the people, the mom and pop shops that were selling you your tires for your car, the tires are being sold at Walmart. Pretty soon the bakery is shut down because they're selling that stuff at Walmart, and the grocery store, and pretty soon all these employees that worked at all these mom and pop places are either on the dole or they're working at Walmart. And Walmart starts seeing a drop in money income, and so they pull out of that town, and then you got a ghost town. You don't even have enough money left in the city coffers to try to romance another big box store.
Well, isn't that the same thing? So so what I'm trying to say is, wouldn't that same thing happen to big companies that do bring in money, like let's say Amazon again, or Apple? Like if we impose a lot of regulations, I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Sure.
Like what's stopping them from leaving and taking their business with them, thus getting rid of a good or a service, thus getting rid of the potential job opportunities? Because Amazon does contribute a lot of jobs. And yes, I asked this, I think I imposed this question the other day. I was like, well, Jeff Bezos is a rich man. Nobody compares to him except Elon Musk. Now, we always talk about Jeff Bezos because for some reason he's the villain and not Elon Musk. But for some reason, I get paying your fair share. Totally, 100%. But has he not already contributed enough in terms of the millions of jobs he's already created through his warehouse, delivery service, software engineering, streaming services. Has that product, and has that not contributed enough to the society to where we say, you know what, Jeff, you're off the hook?
I wish that were so, but uh, Captain,
why? Because everybody always asks me, or they would always say, no, he needs to pay his fair share. He needs to pay his
yeah,
taxes. And again, I'm not saying he shouldn't, but I want to know why. Why is the money component so much more crucial and critical than all the things that he has done? Why are we harping on that? Why is that the important thing?
captains of industry back in the 30s and the 40s, people like Dale Carnegie and Rockefeller, they not only paid their people well, they also contributed to the community. And I guess maybe they haven't done enough of that, because if you ever watch NPR, the commercials, even though they're not called commercials, in between shows are usually some corporation that recently got into trouble for something they did, and they're trying to whitewash uh, their reputation again, so that people forget the bad things that happened. Um, and I think that we're at that juncture with people like Bezos. He's done some bad things by not paying his people enough, by, like you said, treating them like slaves. And believe me, the plan is not to pay them better. His plan is the same plan that Uber has and Lyft, and that's to get to the point where you've got robots doing everything.
Right.
They don't care about the workers. They don't care about what they care about is getting the stuff out there to consumers. And Uber is the same way. They're they're drooling at the fact of having driverless cars. They want that day to be here now, so that they no longer have to listen to people bitching and moaning about how their pay ends up being $10 an hour after they take care of their motor vehicle necessities.
We have Dell joining chat. Hey Dell, what's up? How you doing, buddy? So, that's actually kind of why I was a Andrew Yang supporter. I loved Yang. I thought he was the only one making sense. He was the only one talking about the automation crisis that's going to displace millions of jobs, and he called it the job apocalypse. And I was like, that makes total sense to me. Here's a guy with evidence to support his claim. He's making a claim, a sound claim. Here's evidence to support it. And he's projecting, making a prediction, and saying what we should do to respond. Nobody else, at least as a politician, has made that articulate of a argument for why we should have a new system in place, like universal basic income. I was like, dude, that makes total sense. Sold. Sold,
You want
dude.
to hear something weird? Nixon was going to push universal basic income when he was president, but his staff said, no, people will say you're doing welfare for all.
Yeah. Well, and how he wants to pay for it is he's I think combining a couple systems. Like, you can either opt in to universal basic income if you're on welfare, or if you're on Social Security or something like that. You can either opt in and choose to give your paycheck back to the government that you would have received, or if your Social Security is more than what you would have received from universal basic income, which I think it was like $1,200. So enough to cover rent, maybe basic utilities. But he said that you could opt out of UBI, so that way it would help take away some of the burden. And then he is like, well, let's try and get some of the money up here that's at the very top 1% of our country specifically. And I made a lot of sense to me. I was like, all right.
Yeah.
Totally a Andrew Yang fan.
Bernie talked a lot about that stuff too, but Bernie unfortunately sounds like a scolding teacher.
Yeah.
We got to this way.
Again, his ideas on education and it being higher education and it being free were, I think, a little too progressive for our country.
No, I don't think they were, because everything's being adopted now that he's come up with. As far as free college, that wasn't what he said. He said free tuition. They still pay fees and still have to
Really?
find a place to live and pay for their books, but it was just tuition. So not really asking that much. And again, that's an investment in our
Right.
future.
I mean, if you
So
consider the Afghan war that
we
we
know,
paid billions of dollars into, we could have definitely afforded free college for everybody.
right.
So, I mean, totally get it. And I I never wanted free college. I just wanted affordable college because it didn't make sense why I have to pay for a college football team when I don't even go to any of the games if I went to a big school. Like, why do I have to fund the football team? Get that through your ticket sales and advertisement. Don't make me pay for that as a student here. That makes no sense. I don't have to
Right.
freaking pay for that. Take that off my tuition. Ridiculous.
I agree.
Why should I be paying the $1 billion salary or $100,000, a couple million
And
dollar
again,
salary of the freaking board presidents of this school? Makes no sense.
but Dylan, if you go down that road too far, you've got people saying that, well, I don't have a kid in school. Why should I pay for schools? I don't have this. Why should I pay for that? Uh, I don't have anybody in the military. Why should I be paying them to bomb some other country? Uh, that's where that conversation goes. It starts getting a little dangerous.
I mean, that's a fair question, though. Is it not?
I agree.
Is it not? Like, if I don't use those services, why should I pay for somebody else? Like, what? I'm not saying that that's Chad. I'm not saying that that's what we should be asking. It's a fair question. How do we answer that if someone asks that? What is the correct response to that? Do you just
That
have a social obligation being a part of
exactly.
this country?
That's another part of democratic socialism is public schools, because we said that one of the things that was most important was to have an educated um, we educate everybody, and public school was about that. What happened was things started getting priced out of their reach, and I mean the wealthy even go to different schools than we go to. So and you get the school vouchers with the religious schools and all of that. Pretty soon you got a pretty messed up system. So we have to decide what we're going to do with that in the future.
Right. And I think it was I don't remember who proposed the idea, but they were saying like as a student, like for K through 12, everybody should get like instead of the current model where it's free. It or at least the schools have the power right now, right? That's why they don't pay their teachers enough and that's why we have teachers leaving in unfavorable conditions. We're stuffing 30 students into a one teacher ratio classroom that can't
Yeah,
sustain that or support that. We're asking teachers to pay out of pocket for all these materials and they're just not appreciated enough. So I think I forget who proposed the idea, but they said that to give the power back to the students so that they can choose which teachers they want to go be a part of is you give everybody an $8,000 voucher or something around. I don't remember how it was calculated, but you give them the voucher, you give them a tuition voucher, and you tell them they can go anywhere. This makes the schools now compete for that money. So instead of having crappy teacher conditions, having crappy education systems, like it makes them step up their game because as the power holder, like money is power, like I hold the power here. As the power holder, I can choose to do whatever I want. And now you have to fight for it instead of me having to go to you.
it's a bad model. It's not like, and you cre- uh, treating schools like companies. You're going to run into problems there, because all the big money is going to flow away from public schools, because public schools have to take everybody. These private schools don't. They get to cherry pick,
Right.
and that's not right. So um,
So then what's the
there
alternative then? I mean, there's
the
no
alternative to get people involved in our schools, and And a lot of parents are doing just that. Excuse me. They're, they're getting involved and making a difference and becoming teachers, aides, and things like that. A long time ago, what I suggested was that everybody be trained to teach something, and that everybody, like a one-on-one situation with students, because I think that's what the best way of learning is person to person. You can make a connection with somebody. You can teach them something.
I agree with that. I think
That's what
I
I tried to do
think
with the school too.
I think schools though, if you and again you turn the model on their head, you make schools compete. And no, you're not a fan of that idea, but it's just like the school systems now, or at least higher education systems. Like most people go to a school or a college based off of its reputation. Now there are a few examples, like if you just want to go to a technical college because it's cheaper, you want to get your core classes done. Totally valid reason, but I think the general perception is most people go to a specific school like University of Georgia, Emory, or Harvard, specifically for the reputation that it has. And I think if you give the power back to the students, they can set the reputation. Like it forces you or the school to have a good reputation. So I choose where I want to go. Sort of like higher education. I choose where I want to go. I choose to either go to Harvard or something like. Now there's some stipulation to that. Obviously, they can deny me, if I don't have the right skill set or whatnot. But that's
Well,
that's the model. I think that we should at least try to identify the positives and sort
yeah.
of chisel out where we could do better.
Well, I was poor. I college was not in the cards for me, and it wasn't until my company offered tuition aid that I jumped on it and was able to go to college and get my degree in journalism. But I was limited on how much money I could spend because I had to put the money out first, and they got reimbursed if my grades were at least above a C. And so I went to Cal State Northridge, which was a good school, especially for journalism. But I didn't know that at the time. I went there because it was local and I could afford it. I would have liked to have gone to UCLA or Stanford
Right.
or one of those, but that was not money I had to wait for to get back.
That's fair. That's a fair point. There, I forget what I was going to say. Um,
I hate when that happens.
yeah, I was just, I would think it was a good question too. I just don't repeat what you were saying just a second ago, but like
I was,
start at the very beginning of what you were saying, and I hopefully it'll jog.
you mean about yeah, I had to, in order to go to college, I had to wait until my company offered tuition aid, and then I had to have the money up front to pay for the classes and my books and everything, and get reimbursed at the end of the semester.
Ah, got it. Okay, it had nothing to do with what. I'm so sorry.
Hey,
But something you said triggered the thought, and I have no idea what you said. What brain freeze? Yes, of course, Del. But what do you think of the current structure of school? What do you think? And I'm talking about curriculum wise. Do you think that we're doing the next generation disservice or a service by keeping the curriculum the same, like teaching them just straight math? You go through these core classes and then call it a day. Is there?
Yeah, or is the wrong idea. I can understand why they wanted to do that, so that if you're a student today in California and your family moves to Maryland, you can pretty much track the classes that you're going to be taking because they'll be the same ones. But on the other hand, it doesn't allow for the freedom that you need to come up with things like civics classes. Civics is so important; it's not being taught, and classes that home ec, I guess, has gone by the wayside. I really don't know. I haven't
Right.
got,
Well,
but there are so many classes. If I had known how to track my bank account, I may not have been in this bad position as I was there for years. But um, we need some more common sense practical things to be taught in our schools, including the ability to debate without turning into an argument.
I agree. I 100% agree. I think our education system needs a complete overhaul. I think we need to identify our education system and figure out what's important. I mean, we've known for years that there are things that we can do early on in a child's education to help them be more successful. And one of the things you can do is to teach them empathy, teach them to socialize. You can teach them, and I don't know how we do this. Maybe we'd form a class specifically around it.
Well, homeschooling undermines that completely. And we need to get rid of homeschooling because one, they don't use those, they don't learn those socializations school skills, and they also may not be actually learning much of anything. Depends on their parents if they college graduates themselves or dropped out at 9th grade like mine did.
Interesting. Dell saying socialism. You know, I think our education system needs a complete overhaul. I can't say this enough. I mean, we're not paying teachers adequately. I couldn't tell you the last time I knew or needed the parabola of a certain graph or formula. I couldn't tell you when the last time I identified the powerhouse of a cell. Like, these things I think are good initially to teach people how to, again, I think math is good for logic processing, figuring out how to do things logistically. But if we had more, like you said, practical applications for school, like teaching people empathy, like how do we do that? And how do we do that in a non-critical way where we're imposing specific beliefs on people? Like, how do we teach kids to think for themselves, but at the same time teach them, you know, social skills on not everything is a debate, not everything you need to be right. Like, how do we do that? And is school the place for that? Do we do that, or is that a place for the parent?
Well, there's another thing that I want to go back a little bit. Things like math and science, those are really important things to, maybe not for you and me to learn, but until you get a child in there and teach them those concepts, you don't know whether or not that's going to be the next physicist or, somebody that can help change the world, discover the cure for cancer or something like that.
Right. And I'm not saying that there's no need for those things.
Right.
All I'm saying is that maybe we need to reevaluate the purpose of school as a society.
I think teachers would agree with you.
Yeah. And then we have Dell says, you agree with you? I think I do know I agree with me. Thus assume
There's a school down the street from where I live that was going to take the concepts in my book, and they're doing different things there. They're a charter school. They're teaching 3 subjects together. They're teaching English, history, and was it science? The 3 of those together. And they were going to take a couple of concepts I bring up in my book and teach and come at them from 3 different directions. And I thought that was really innovative. And so I'm hoping they'll still do that.
That's awesome. What's the name of the school?
It's called.
Shout out to them.
Hang on a second. Terry, where did you go to school?
What school? Which one?
High school.
High school, El Camino.
El Camino, that's it.
El Camino. Shout out to them.
Yeah. Well, that teacher that was going to do that is now running for city council. So that's probably why the idea didn't come to fruition this semester. But
hopefully it does. Fingers crossed. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. And I'm writing a sequel now to that book because I was told by some friends of a labor union in Geneva, Switzerland. They said, make sure your readers understand that your book is for American readers only because we do things differently in Europe. But the funny thing is I've been through Italy and Thailand and Morocco and with my book under my arm, and they say, we have the same problems there. So I don't know what he was thinking about, but so I'm writing a sequel called Capitalism Kills, the global edition, and it compares Canada, France, Morocco, Thailand, and Norway. And what I'm trying to do is draw a connection between how these countries treat their middle class and how much success they have in the world.
Where can we find those books?
That book is one I'm working on right now. I'm 160 pages into it, so should be out in another year. The first book, the one that you and I've been talking about, Capitalism Killed the Middle Class, took me 4 years to write. My novel that I'm releasing on October 7th took me 3 months.
Are there audiobooks available? Did you do any audible?
I didn't do those in audiobooks. I'm thinking about going back and doing that.
You should.
The novel will definitely be an audiobook.
You definitely should, because I'd listen. I love audiobooks. They're
Yeah, a lot of
amazing.
people are telling me that.
Yeah, definitely. And you have to narrate it.
I can't. I have Parkinson's and I have asthma, so I run out of air before I reach the end of my.
Well, you've done really good here. I mean, I would never have noticed.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you're doing fantastic. Dell says,
Okay.
thus assume the underlying motivation an equally well-educated society for the purpose of school. And then Gina, my mother, is joining in saying, in agreement to teach basic life skills. Perfect.
All right.
Well, thank you, Mr. Dan. Anything else you'd like to say before we conclude?
One thing I didn't cover was Project 1033, which is another important thing. I forget, the 1980s, I guess it was. They decided to up the war on drugs by mandating the Department of Defense to sell some of their weaponry to law enforcement. And we've seen how well that works. But so for bargain basement prices, your local law enforcement can buy grenade launchers and M16s and things like that. And unfortunately, some school districts have also opted in. LA Unified School District has 61 M16s and 3 grenade launchers. Now, what are they going to use them for? And they haven't been trained on them. So what purpose are they going to serve? LA County Sheriff's Department bought a camouflage suit that's good for the snow and 50 pairs of snowshoes. There is no snow in LA County.
You know,
That's created the militarization of our law enforcement. And Clinton actually expanded it to include the war on terror, but I don't think those weapons are being used the way they should be, and maybe we should end that program.
Well, I'd love to have you back on if you want to talk about that a little bit more.
Sure, I'd love to come back.
Yeah, so that's a perfect cliffhanger to highly anticipate the next episode.
Yep.
So
And
go ahead.
I'll give out the website where you can track where your local police force what they bought.
Oh yeah, so link that to me in Matchmaker, and then we can put that in the comments.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody, thank you for daydreaming with us. This has been Mr. Dan McCrory.
McCrory, yes.
Thank you, and you can find his books on where?
Just about everywhere. They're anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world. Perfect. So everybody go check out those books, and if you could send me a link to maybe an ebook version of it or where someone can purchase it, I can put that in the comment section in the description.
Sure, will do.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Dan, I'm going to keep you over here. Thank you for daydreaming with us. Hopefully the podcast does not cut out when I hit end stream. So I love you all. Have a great night.